Okay, we begin in Washington. Did you watch the last 3 days of televised hearings, damning testimony from 9 separate witnesses? This as House Democrats try to convince the American public President Trump abused his power for personal political gain. So to get the recap on how all of this went down, I want to bring in Catherine Faulders on Capitol Hill, and we have Inez de la Cuetara at the White House. And Catherine, I'll start with you because after watching 3 straight days, I just want to hear from you. What stands out from these witnesses, in your opinion?
Okay, Kimberly, so we just wrapped up 40 hours of public testimony with these witnesses coming forward. And I think the big takeaways here are a few things. One, we learned much more about Rudy Giuliani, his role in it. Some witnesses said that they believed that Giuliani was speaking on behalf of the president. So in their mind, that these orders about Ukraine policy were coming directly from the president. Now, importantly, the EU ambassador, Gordon Sondland, he testified, of course, about his dealings with Ukraine. And then you heard Fiona Hill yesterday. She's the president's former top Russia expert. She was testifying about all of these different channels on Ukraine and her frustration with it. But what stuck out to me about her testimony is she said that she believed that Gordon Sondland, the EU ambassador, was, quote, running this domestic political errand, that there was no concern over foreign policy. Now, the other big takeaway to me was Sondland kept saying that everybody was, quote, in the loop in the administration, that he wasn't a rogue actor acting on his own. He brought emails, Kimberly, to the hearing. He showed emails that he sent about Ukraine policy that included people like the acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, all of these people who have said that they've really had no involvement in it. That's significant to me because then that's ties to the administration, other people who we haven't heard from, who the White House is blocking, who would have direct access to this information. Now, one other point I do want to make is there's obviously been much testimony about the holdup of aid and what that was conditioned upon. Now, we do know that President Trump gave the order to hold the aid, but what we don't know yet, what we haven't heard from witnesses, is the motivations behind that and whether it was to hurt a political opponent.
Yeah, and Inez, I just want to turn to you for a second here because obviously this was not a good look for the GOP. How are they responding to this? They've been trying to spin this for a while.
That's right, and that's what they're trying to figure out. So we know that White House officials, senior White House officials, including some of the president's closest legal advisors, actually met with a group of Republican senators on Thursday to figure out their strategy going forward when it comes to his Senate impeachment trial. And we know that lawmakers here are split over what to do next. So we know there are some, like Senator Lindsey Graham, who are pushing for a shorter Senate trial, a trial that could be as short as 2 weeks. They say they kind of want to get impeachment over with. They're confident the president's not going to be removed from office. They want to get it over with. They want to get back to policy making and to focusing on the 2020 presidential campaign. They say the shorter trial will limit political damage to the president. On the flip side, you have some who are pushing for a long, drawn-out process. They say that the president hasn't been able to bring his case to the American people. He hasn't been able to defend himself, so they want him to be able to bring in witnesses and evidence and show that, in their view, he did nothing wrong here. So we'll see what happens there. The president was asked about all of this on Fox and Friends this morning. He says he does want a trial, and he says he wants to bring in a couple witnesses. He says he wants to bring in the whistleblower and Adam Schiff, that he wants to quiz Adam Schiff with regards to what he knew. And President Trump believes that Adam Schiff kind of conspired with the whistleblower here. So he wants to be able to interview both those witnesses during that Senate trial.
And Catherine, I mean, as Inez was saying, there are some people that we haven't heard from the witnesses that we have been able to hear from. Do you think that's enough for the American public to sort of draw their conclusion?
Question. I mean, Democrats certainly think that they have enough evidence, especially if there's an article of impeachment on obstruction. But as Inez was saying, the one key witness here, well, there's a lot of key witnesses, but one of the ones who, still is up in the air, maybe he will come in, is the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton. The White House has blocked him. He was hoping to join on to a court case to get a ruling as to whether he had to appear, but he's come up a lot in testimony, and his lawyer has actually written a letter saying that Bolton has a lot of information, that he was in on a lot of these meetings, and some meetings that we haven't even heard about yet. So a bit of a teaser there. And you saw those tweets that he's been tweeting out this morning, kind of leaving us hanging a little bit, wondering if perhaps he'll come out on Twitter and say something about this.
All right, so no more hearings for now, so we'll have to see what happens next. I want to thank Catherine Falders and Inez de la Cuatera. Thank you guys for the updates. We appreciate it. And we're going to turn to a royal scandal at Buckingham Palace. Prince Andrew under intense scrutiny after that televised BBC interview where he discussed his friendship with billionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The fallout resulting in him stepping away from his role and many of his associated organizations stepping away from him. So for more, I want to bring in Maggie Rulli in our London bureau. Maggie, this interview just didn't go well. There was lots of criticism, especially for his lack of empathy for the victims.
Yeah, Kimberly, I'm not sure how much you guys had a chance to see this interview, but you say it didn't go well. It's pretty much been universally panned, not just by the tabloids, by British media outlets, by media outlets in the U.S. I mean, mostly everyone is saying this interview was an absolute disaster. Now, again, during this interview, Prince Andrew's talking about a formerly good friend of his, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And I think you see it sort of in the interviewer's face there. The language that Prince Andrew is using is now being criticized as being not harsh enough, not being an appropriate tone for the severity of the crimes that Epstein is convicted of. And this is sort of an ongoing problem, this lack of empathy, as we're saying. And it's not, again, just the tabloids. The public has really started to turn on Andrew. And again, we've seen these rumors swirling. We knew about his relationship with Epstein for quite some time. But it was after this interview. It was such a bombshell, Kimberly. It happened over the weekend. That's when this fallout began. And that's why just a few days later, he officially resigned from his royal duties. This is a huge deal here in the UK and now really around the world.
Yeah, Maggie, I have to ask you, I mean, the royals have had a lot of scandals, but have we ever seen someone suspended from their role in this way, in this manner?
Well, that's what's so surprising, Kimberly. This is really unprecedented, especially in modern times. People are sort of saying the Queen fired her son. And while that's not exactly accurate, it's not far off. Andrew is stepping down from all of his official royal duties. We know that he canceled a planned work trip that he had just for this weekend to Bahrain. So it's definitely a huge shift. He's no longer taking public funds. He is no longer a working member of the royal family. That is incredibly significant. But as you mentioned, it's unprecedented. It's historic in modern times. We don't know what's going to happen next. The royal family doesn't have a rule book for what they're supposed to do. So, on Thursday, we sort of saw an all hands on deck at Buckingham Palace, newspapers calling it a crisis summit where the Queen got involved, his ex-wife got involved, everyone trying to figure out what to do. We know that he might keep working in a private capacity, but what does this mean? Will he still work with charities privately? We know there's a huge shakeup on his palace staff, but will he even have a palace staff? I mean, tons of unanswered questions here, Kimberly.
All right, Maggie Rulli right there in our London bureau. We appreciate all of the updates. Thank you so much. And guys, we turn to outrage at the University of Indiana. The school will not fire a professor who used his social media accounts to express what the school's provost called, quote, racist, sexist, and homophobic views. She also called his views stunningly ignorant, but said he would keep his job, citing his First Amendment rights. So our Diane Macedo joins me now to discuss all of this. Diane, I just want you to give us a reminder of what happened here.
All right, there's a lot here. I'm going to sum this up as best as I can. So earlier this month, business professor Eric Rasmussen posted a quote on Twitter. I want to read it exactly. It says, "Geniuses are overwhelmingly male because they combine outlier higher IQ with moderately low agreeableness and moderately low conscientiousness." Now, he says when he talked to us yesterday that he posted it mainly because he found the link between genius and low conscientiousness interesting. But he also shared the article that quote came from. And the title of that article is, "Are Women Destroying Academia?" Probably.
Wow.
So the tweet went viral and the school was inundated with demands that he be removed. Now the school's provost issued this scathing letter saying it's not just this tweet, but that for years he has been posting on social media messages that are racist, sexist, and homophobic. Those are her words. But she also says that that speech is protected by the First Amendment, and as a public institution, they cannot and will not fire him. Now, he has responded to her letter, essentially saying that his views are being misrepresented, and using this tweet as an example, he says his wife used to be a teacher. He's not at all saying that women don't belong in academia. So just because he shared this article that has that view doesn't mean that he agrees with it.
I just want you to talk a little bit more about the First Amendment part of this, because that gets a little tricky. How does the First Amendment protect him in this case?
So the school is pointing out that this may be different than if it happened at a private company. They are a public institution, and so as a public institution, they are beholden to the First Amendment. And they say because this speech was made in the private sphere, he wasn't speaking on behalf of the university, this was his private Twitter account, and he is allowed to talk about concerns of the public, and this qualifies as that. So the school is saying we cannot fire him even if we wanted to. And the professor is saying the same. He's a tenured professor. He's protected by the First Amendment. So that is the school's stance. They are, however, saying that they are putting processes in place so that students can have other options to avoid his class, so they won't have to take his class.
Yes.
And that they are using double-blind grading, for example, and putting other processes in place, they say, to ensure that he can't be biased against students in his grading. He is saying that by coming down on a dissident professor, they're encouraging, not discouraging bias. And he's saying, what happens if liberal teachers check the Twitter accounts of conservative students? Maybe they're going to be biased against them.
I just imagine, though, that it's going to be a lot of tension with him remaining on campus under these circumstances.
Well, he said that when he went into class, it was this awkward kind of silence in the beginning, and he immediately cut the tension by bringing it up right away. And to him, he says he's trying to learn this, use this as a learning experience. You know, he is a business professor, and so one of the things you have to deal with in business often is a PR crisis. And so he says to him, maybe he can use the opportunity to glean some lessons that he can not only learn from, but that he can also pass on to his students.
Silver lining there, I suppose.
It's a talker, that's for sure.
All right. Diane Macedo, thank you for the updates. We appreciate that. Good to see you.
Likewise.
All right, guys, we're moving back overseas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been indicted, facing charges of corruption, including bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. And our James Longman is in London to break it all down. James?
Hi, Kim. Yeah, we're talking about one of America's closest allies, and it has now been thrown into turmoil. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been formally charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. He is the first ever sitting Israeli Prime Minister to face charges like these, and the list of alleged wrongdoing is long and colourful. Hundreds of thousands of dollars alleged to have swapped hands, pink champagne and cigars offered to him apparently by a wealthy friend in return for political favours, and a quid pro quo relationship, we've heard that phrase before, with a telecom tycoon in return for favourable news coverage. Now, he has vowed to stay in office. He is known to be a bit of a fighter and has been using the language perhaps of his close friend Donald Trump, because he's been calling the investigation a witch hunt. He says it's all politically motivated and it basically amounts to a coup. But these corruption allegations have been bubbling away for months, and the country's Attorney General has said that the ruling shows that no one in Israel is above the law. But remember, all this is in the context of an already pretty fraught political atmosphere. Recent elections produced no clear winner, so it's likely a new round will take place soon. It's thought the Prime Minister's allies will try and ensure he can use the office of Prime Minister to get immunity, but that's obviously going to get a lot of pushback. Benjamin Netanyahu has long been a fixture in Middle East politics, but it's possible that is all about to change. He's known to be a survivor, but fighting an election and these sorts of charges may be too much even for him. Kimberly?
All right, James, interesting there. And guys, in the meantime, a scary scene in Los Angeles. An engine for a Philippine Airlines plane catching fire shortly after takeoff. Pretty scary. So our David Curley is at Reagan National Airport with the latest there. David?
Kimberly, this is kind of a crazy scene to see. We'll put it in some context, but let's look at the pictures first. This is a Philippine wide-body 777 jetliner taking off from LAX. So on the ground, people are seeing this scene of flames shooting out of the engine. And take a look on board. A father at takeoff is taking pictures of his little girl. Then suddenly you hear this boom. You can see the reaction of something happening, and then the camera looks outside and you can see those flames bursting out of the engine. Now, the passengers on board this Philippine airline flight from LAX to Manila say that this went on for about 15 minutes, these bursts of flames. And every time that happens, there's a loud bang and the aircraft shudders, so it can be quite frightening. They said they didn't get a lot of information from the captain as to what was actually going on, other than they were going back to Los Angeles. It took about 45 minutes to land at LAX. That aircraft was so heavy with fuel and all the passengers. The pilots really had to jam on the brakes, so firefighters were there to meet the aircraft. They made sure that those brakes, which were very hot and smoky, did not ignite and actually burst into flames. Everybody was able to get off that aircraft. Now, what this is, and we heard it from the pilot when he called in a mayday and wanted to return on this emergency landing, was a surge or stall. It's called a compressor stall. And what happens in the engine is that there is excess fuel that isn't burned inside the engine, and as it's exiting the engine, it ignites. It's kind of like a car backfiring, the same kind of thing. The engine's not running correctly, and the fuel has to do something, and it basically gets exploded as it comes out of that engine. It looks pretty dramatic, and it feels like it on the aircraft. The first time, it's got to be a little scary for the crew as well. But these compressor stalls really don't necessarily cause a problem for the aircraft. It's a matter of getting back on the ground, landing, get the engine checked out and repaired before the aircraft takes off again. In this case, we learned that the Philippine Airlines didn't have another aircraft to put the passengers on. It tried to rebook them on other aircraft last night. Some had to go to hotels. They're hoping they get them all to Manila today out of LAX. Kimberly?
All right, David, a bit of a nightmare there. All right, guys, let's take a look and see what the weather is doing out there. And our ABC meteorologist, Rob Marciano, has the national forecast. Rob?
Hey, Kimberly, great to be with you. We are tracking a series of storms that will be going across the U.S. right through the holiday week. Had a horrible accident last night just outside of Denver along I-25. This is a 50-car pileup. We had freezing rain and snow around 7 o'clock. This all went down. There were some injuries, but none life-threatening, thankfully. This cold core system bringing not snow, but hail into the Valley of the Sun. Phoenix, seeing hail bouncing off the roadways there, slowing down traffic, even a double rainbow. You don't get snow very often, so the kids taking advantage of the accumulating hail and breaking out the sleds there in Phoenix. They may be able to do that again next week as we get another cold core system. But this system now will head into Texas today in the southeast, tapping moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. Tomorrow will be across the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic, and then on Sunday, really ramping up from D.C., Philly, New York, up to New Haven, Hartford, Providence, Boston. Going to be heavy rain event along I-95. Maybe some accumulating snows in the interior, especially at the higher elevations of the Catskills and some of the other mountain ranges. Here's the active pattern shaping up. That jet stream making a big dip in the west come Thanksgiving. That's our next big system. But there'll also be a significant system in the Midwest midweek during that travel peak with rain and snow. And what's in the west there will be traversing the country for the Sunday travel day. So not a good travel situation shaping up next week. But if you like pretty pictures of the snow, this is Smuggler's Notch, a bluebird day. A lot of ski resorts, both in the east and west, are opening up this weekend for the holiday, and they've got some fresh snow that we expect. Here's your chances of a white Christmas, coast to coast, mostly in the higher elevations and mostly interior areas where it should be, and ski resorts benefiting for that. And then Oliver also. This is our new friend. It is a cat that likes snow. I haven't met many of these, but he's super cute, super clean too. And he's staying hydrated by wiping his paws in the snow there, maybe building a little snow castle or snow bunny maybe to chase him. I don't know. It's cute, is it not? Is it not, Kimberly? Hope you like some snow yourself. Not coming here in New York for some time to come, but we'll be watching that as winter approaches. Kimberly?
Oliver is adorable. Thank you, Rob. All right, guys. And remember when Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey announced it would ban all political ads? He said in a tweet that the reach of political messages should be earned, not bought. Well, those bans have officially gone into effect, but not without a bit of confusion, which is why we have our Aaron Katursky. Aaron, it all sounded easy breezy, but it's actually not.
As long as they don't ban the cat videos.
Right.
I think we're good. It isn't easy because Twitter has sort of delineated what is and what isn't allowed. So as of now, advertising candidates or elections or specific legislation is a no-no on Twitter.
Okay.
But Twitter is going to allow what they call cause-based advertising. These are issue ads. We like a good economy, or we like the environment, provided that those ads do not advocate for a specific political outcome. So you can generally say, let's have a nice economy, let's love the environment, but you cannot advertise to say, let's have this particular economic policy or that environmental policy.
That's a little tricky.
It is a little tricky, and it's going to take a little bit of time for people, I think, to navigate. But Twitter felt like it had to do something. Social media companies have been under pressure ever since the 2016 election to try and figure out how to rein in all of the disinformation on its site. Now, critics would say that banning political advertising doesn't get rid of the disinformation because you can just have some troll somewhere, say in Russia,
right,
tweeting out what sound like legitimate messages they don't have to pay for.
Yeah. So some social media platforms are following suit. I saw Google is doing something, but Facebook's still not doing anything.
Facebook is not, but Google is taking, I guess, a bit of a half step in between, and they are banning hyper-targeting of people based on their political affiliation or their zip code. And I think this is meant to get us out of the vacuum in which we often get our information. So if you're a registered Democrat, obviously Democrats want to target you specifically, but Google would like you to get a variety of ads.
Yeah.
And so they're going to prohibit advertisers from hyper-targeting based on certain categories. Again, critics say this isn't enough to get rid of disinformation, which often spreads organically.
You have to think, like, when these CEOs started these companies, they never would have imagined that they'd be in these positions now, so closely aligned with what's happening in politics.
It's really stunning, but it shows you how social media has become so important, a multi-million-dollar advertising business when it comes to politics. And of course, good old-fashioned television and radio are upset that the social media companies don't have to really play by any rules other than the ones they impose for themselves. Traditional broadcasters are bound by specific rules when it comes to political advertising. They have to charge the lowest rate. They have to certify content. So there's a lot more policing involved that social media companies don't have to do and, frankly, aren't really willing to do.
Still a good move by Twitter?
Well, we'll see if it quells some of the criticism or if it works. But check your Twitter feed, see what's out there.
Aaron Katersky breaking it down as usual. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
good to see you.
You too.
And guys, before we go, Tesla's Elon Musk has been working hard and now has a new pickup truck in town. It's electric and it's called the Cybertruck, but it actually looks nothing like a truck. It looks more like a Porsche or maybe a DeLorean with stainless steel, and it has this triangle top. What do you think? You see it right there. Well, don't worry about deciding just yet if you're going to spend upwards of $70,000 because production will not start until late 2021. Now, one other standout moment from the reveal, the truck's windows are supposed to be bulletproof, but when they tested that out, not so much. So yeah, I hope Elon can cover the damages at least. All right, guys, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. And then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. It's Friday. Have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you next week.